So this is the last video for the term on algebra. It looks at rearranging, or what we call transposing formulae. So it's still using the idea of algebra and inverse operations to rearrange variables in an equation. We call that changing the subject. The only difference here is that we're not actually solving the equation, we're actually just rearranging the equation. So transpose means to change the form of something, in this case the equation. In these cases, formulae often have two or more variables, and what we're trying to do is isolate one of those variables, make it what we call the subject of the equation. It's a useful skill that allows us to simplify more complex equations and see how we can manipulate them and combine them with other equations. So here's an example of some equations that we're going to use. In this case, we're going to make the x the subject of each of those equations. So here's the first one. If we consider x as our unknown, same as we did before, what we're doing is multiplying by k and then adding m. So that's what you'd normally do with our order operations. Working backwards through an equation to undo it, we would take m and then divide by k. So they're the steps we're going to take here. Doesn't matter that they're not numbers that we can see. Just remember, a variable or polynomial can also be a number. So the first step, we take the m away, and the second step, we divide the whole thing by k. So that's like brackets on the top, recall. Okay, now there's no way to really check that answer by substituting a value, because we don't have a value to substitute in, but we can see logically whether that makes sense or not. Here's our second example. Now we're trying to get x to be the subject. So once again, there's a couple ways to do this. One is just to solve it normally. So if we consider that order of operations, we're trying to isolate the x. The left-hand side doesn't really matter. What we're doing, working through the equation, is taking 2 in the bracket and then multiplying by 7. So working backwards, we do the opposite or inverse. Divide by 7, add 2. So that's what we're trying to accomplish. So let's work through it now. We divide everything by 7, so it's all over the fraction of 7, or the denominator of 7, and then we add 2 to that. So that's one possible answer. Another possible answer is to expand that bracket first. It's the distributive law. So we multiply the 7 by the x, and the 7 by the negative 2. We end up with this on the right, and on the left, 6y, and 6 times 1 is 6. Now we're going to undo this equation. We're going to add 14 to both sides first, and group our like term, so that means plus 20, and then divide all of that by 7. Now these are exactly the same as each other. The only difference is you need to expand the bracket in the previous example first. Both answers are valid and correct. Here's our last examples. Basically, they are formulas that are used in science or other places. We're just going to show you how to rearrange them. So we've got 2 there. In the bracket is the variable we're trying to isolate or become the subject of the formula. And that's the mathematical terminology. So we're going to isolate d. So the first thing we do is remove the last operation by adding 3 to both sides. That cancels the 3 here. And then we divide that by 6. So d equals g plus 3, all divided by 6. Remember, that's like brackets on top. The second example is actually a physics formula. A equals v take u over t. It's acceleration equals the average of your speed. The difference in speed over time, I should say. So we're trying to isolate the v, which is your final velocity. So first thing, you need to get rid of or reverse the dividing, because that's like brackets on top. To multiply both sides by t, cancels this one out. On the left hand side we have a times t, which you could also write as at. And then to get v by itself, we add u to both sides, the opposite of taking u. So we get at plus u. And for those of you in science who have started some dynamics or kinematics studies, like physics, you would recognize that formula as v equals u plus at. It's a physics formula. So that's what we're trying to accomplish there. Rearranging equations with pure algebra. There's no values or solutions to that at this point. It just allows us to recalculate answers with our numbers at this point.